So when New World first launched, it had almost 1 million players. And then over time, that number has dwindled down to about 110,000. Now, there's a lot of different reasons why people left. There's a lot of different reasons why people maybe didn't even jump into the game to begin with. But one thing is for certain, a lot of people really did enjoy the game that are no longer playing. So what I want to talk about today is, should you come back to play New World? Is it worth playing right now? There are certain things that might have pushed you away in the beginning, but maybe those things got fixed, or maybe they're still there and you want to keep this one on the back burner until those things get buttoned up. Let's talk about all of the different changes that came to New World and whether or not it's worth jumping back in. So first off, there's been a multitude of huge updates for the game. So far, they have changed a ton of stuff. They've added a ton of stuff. And luckily, they've been listening to player feedback pretty well. And a lot of those things that we really didn't like in the beginning have been adjusted. Whether they're barely adjusted, whether they're completely eliminated, that's a little bit different. But a lot of those things have been adjusted. So we're going to start this sucker off with some quality of life improvements. So the first one, biggest one, faction changes can now be done every 60 days instead of 120 days. So if you're someone who is really kind of, oh man, I don't want to wait 120 full days in between faction changes, especially if I changed factions to play with some friends who are no longer playing and now I feel like I'm stuck, you can now change every 60 days instead. Now, part 2 to this, all trading posts are now linked, so you don't need to go run all over the place to different trading hubs to get the best deals, right? And this also reduces the importance or the effectiveness of things like Everfall and Windsward, which ended up being the kind of de facto trading hubs. So now I can go to Morningdale, I can go to First Light and still access the same stuff. So one of the biggest things when it comes to New World was the fact that we don't have mounts. And not having mounts makes basically navigating the game kind of suck, right? You're running all over the place. It takes forever to get from point A to point B. If you use your Azoth to fast travel, then, you know, you can end up burning through that pretty quickly. So you almost have to balance between, is it worth it to travel, to fast travel somewhere, or should I just run there? So the developers came out and said, we're going to make a little adjustment. This is like a happy medium between not having mounts, but needing to do something to make players run around quicker. You now run 10% faster on roads. So as long as you stick to a road, you're going to gain 10% increased movement speed, and this is noticeable. It also has a 3-second timer. So if you're on a road and you have to run through a forest to get to another road because you want to take a shortcut, that movement speed increase will last for 3 seconds and then it'll disappear. So if you can get from one road to another in 3 seconds, then you can maintain that movement speed. So I'm glad it's not just immediately shutting off. So for the PvP players out there, this is another big thing that a lot of people really brought up, is there's no huge reason to flag for PvP. There just wasn't. Before, it was like a very minor experience buff, and that was about it. Now, if you flag for PvP, you gain a 10% luck bonus, so you have a better chance of finding better gear, things like that, and a 30% increased gathering luck bonus for rare materials from gathering. So now if you flag for PvP, you can get some really cool buffs. And the thing is, a lot of people still don't flag for PvP. So if you're someone who doesn't like open world PvP, but you want to get these bonuses, you might be in luck because you can just flag, go gather all of this stuff, and then unflag whenever you want. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Now, the last piece of the quality of life improvements, okay? So a lot of people did not like, myself included, did not like the high watermark system that was in New World. It felt confusing. It wasn't very transparent. It felt like we were fighting the system every single step of the way. And the way the high watermark system worked was you would have, you know, things in your inventory, things you've had equipped, and, you know, you have this great axe, for instance, that's a 500 gear score. And then you get a great axe that drops that's 502. So in the background, the system would go, oh, you know, Vulkan got a great axe that dropped at 502. So now his high watermark, his gear score, is now 502. So he'll get stuff that'll drop around there, and then something else will drop at like 505. Oh, now his high watermark is 505. But the point is, you never really saw it. You never really understood all of the different ways that you can up your high watermark other than just go kill elites and clear elite areas over and over and over again until you start seeing higher level gear. Well, they've gone through and they completely changed this up. So it still functions the same way, but high watermark is now renamed to expertise, and each slot in your gear, so if you press inventory, open things up, you can see on each side of your gear slot, you have an expertise number. And this expertise number is your quote high watermark number. And this makes it very visible on where you are with each slot. So with my gloves, I might be a 505. With my axe, I might be a 504. With my helmet, I might be a 515 because I'm having more luck there. So there's all sorts of different things that you can kind of look at and ingest when it comes to the information that's being presented for the expertise system. And the nice thing is when you get an expertise upgrade, so back to that great axe example, I'm at 500 expertise, a 502 great axe drops, I'll have a big banner that'll pop up that'll say expertise, you know, leveled up or whatever, and it'll show 502 instead of 500. So it just makes it a lot more visible, a lot more inclusive and transparent, and that's something that I really, really like. And I think that that truly needed to happen in order for this game to have some sort of future, because in the end game, it's not very fun or engaging when you're trying to level up your character and you're trying to make improvements, and there's just a lack of consistency and a lack of clarity in how to do that. So that's all the quality of life improvements. Let's talk about some of the crafting stuff. So in crafting, they added something called aptitude. Now, aptitude gives a use for crafting after you've hit 200. So as you continue to craft, you're going to get experience, and then once you pass a certain threshold, you're going to gain an aptitude unlock. This is going to give you a bundle of materials and a chance at schematics and recipes. I really like this because it keeps crafting, skinning, gathering, all of those things very relevant and rewards those who love to partake in crafting and refining. So they also added in some new enemies, the Varangian Knights. These are human enemies that use the same weapons and skills as players. So you'll run into them, they'll have rapiers, they'll have spears, maces, and shields, which I'm upset about, but we don't have those. And they'll have great axes, all that stuff. And they'll use all of the regular skills, reap, bloodlust, all of those things. It's very interesting. So you can find them in First Light, Windsward, and Everfall. They also added in some new lost enemies, ancient guardians, and corrupted villagers. So back to PvP, okay? Let's talk about this for a second because, part 2 of the PvP problem was no one flagged, but then the other half was the PvP missions for factions sucked. They were not good. They were boring, they were repetitive, and it just wasn't fun. So they added in new types of PvP faction missions to make things more fun and engaging. Now you need to do things like hold or capture forts, kill enemy players, or infiltrate war camps to collect plans. So if you're someone who is a big PvP person, you now have a reason to flag, and you now have better missions to go and play rather than sitting there and holding something and going on this kind of big circuit, right? You remember seeing all the players run on these big circuits to kind of flip influence in an area. This is going to make things a little bit more interesting. So I like this. Let's go ahead and keep things moving on. And let's talk about the current winter event that's going on right now called Winterfest, Winter Convergence Festival. There's a couple different names that people call it, but otherwise it's just a big wintry event. You talk to this giant Yeti. He's basically like Santa Claus, and he has this big bag of gifts, and you can go and kind of dig through this, get a present, open that sucker up. You're going to get some gold, you're going to get some items, and you can do this each day. And each settlement also has a massive tree that has a bunch of gifts around it. And if you visit each settlement, you get your gift, then you're going to get even more items, more currency, and more materials. So it's very important to kind of go visit those, or a majority of them each day, because you're going to get something useful. Now, you also get event reputation by doing this. And as you level up your event reputation, you're going to unlock different visual kind of holiday gear, all this Frozen style of gear. Now, this guy does send you on a big quest chain through all of the world. So just like in New World kind of fashion, you're going to have all these quest objectives all over the continent. You're going to start off in Windsward, you're going to have to go to Monarch's Bluffs, Ebonscale, you're going to have to go down to First Light, you're going to have to go all the way up to Eden Grove, you're going to have to go to Morningdale, you're going to have to go all over the place in order to complete these. And this is where kind of the frustration still lies, I would say, in a lot of these quests, is they put them so far apart that you have to spend Azoth if you want to do them quickly, or if you want to run to every single one, you can. But this is really just where things, I think, need to change a little bit when it comes to quest design for New World. I understand what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to extend the life cycle of these quest chains, and that's great, right? They're trying to make this winter event seem last a lot longer than it actually does, and that's fine, but you need to at least bunch them up a little bit. I mean, going to Ebon Scale and then having to run all the way up to Eden Grove, or going to First Light and then having to run all the way up to Great Cleave, all of these things are just this more frustrating than anything. I open my map up and I'm like, oh gosh, now I have to go all the way up there. Well, now I'm low on Azoth, so now I have to go and do a whole bunch of stuff before I can continue this. And I know that's me just kind of being nitpicky and probably lazy, but it just doesn't carry the same kind of gravitas or, you know, flow that other games have when it comes to their festival events. So that's something that I think, if you're still like not enjoying the whole kind of quest design or the distance between quest objectives in New World, that's something that has not changed. So if you're not looking forward to that, then I would say continue to put this one on the back burner. But we spent enough time talking about Winterfest. Let's talk about some new things for us to play with, and that's the Void Gauntlet. So the Void Gauntlet has been added into the game. Now this one was data mined way back before the game even started. I'm talking way back into beta. But it functions pretty similarly to what we thought it would do. So it's a magic DPS and a support weapon. It makes soloing very fun. You can self-heal. You can pump out some really cool damage. It does have a Void Blade, so you can have this. It looks like a Halo energy sword, to be honest with you. Just that's purple. And you can slice things up. There's some really cool AoEs. You can throw an orb out that deals damage as it goes out and then heals things as it comes back in. It scales with intelligence and focus. So if you're someone who really wants to like off heal, then throw some focus on the thing. If you really want to deal like a lot of magic damage, then go for intelligence. So it's a really cool weapon. I really, really like it. And we do have some more stuff coming in the future in terms of new weaponry. We'll get to that in a moment, but we're going to continue talking about what they've added into the game now. And we're going to move into GYPSUM. So I talked about the high watermark system now being expertise, right? And you have almost a better roadmap and a better grasp on each slot and what you need to do to kind of get those numbers up. So GYPSUM is kind of part 2 to that. So expertise being changed and being more transparent to understand what slots are weak and what slots are heavy for you. GYPSUM is a guaranteed way to raise your expertise for those slots. And there's multiple different types of GYPSUM. So for instance, there's Obsidian GYPSUM, Sapphire GYPSUM, Ruby, Emerald, Citron, Amethyst, Topaz, and Diamond. So each one of these comes from a different source. So for instance, Obsidian GYPSUM comes from defeating level 60 plus open world named bosses typically found in elite landmarks. Ruby comes from outpost rush caches. Emerald comes from trade skill aptitude containers. So remember aptitude we talked about a little bit earlier where crafting is more rewarding? Well, now you can get GYPSUM from there as well. You have Amethyst, you have Citron, both are found in Breach and Arena caches, and then Diamond. So right now, Diamond is found only during major events in Eternum. So for instance, we have this big Winterfest. Every tree you visit, you get a Diamond GYPSUM. And then once you take these different GYPSUMs, you can go to a new crafting area called a GYPSUM kiln. And these GYPSUM kilns are going to take whatever GYPSUM you have. So for instance, if you take 3 diamond GYPSUM, you can combine them into 1 diamond GYPSUM orb. I know this is very confusing because GYPSUM is being said a lot, and now we have orbs and all sorts of stuff. So I'll break this down. Each GYPSUM you get, you can craft into an orb. Some require more than others. For instance, Ruby requires 2 Ruby GYPSUM to make 1 Ruby GYPSUM orb. Diamond takes 3. 3 diamond GYPSUM equals 1 diamond orb. And then you can take all these orbs, no matter what you have. So it could be Obsidian, it could be Ruby, it could be Emerald, it could be Diamond. It doesn't matter. You craft these into an orb, and then you take that orb and you can make a cast. And this cast is going to give you a guaranteed expertise increase to whatever slot you want. So let's say your gloves are really low, like they're a 501, and you need to get these up. Then you can go grab 3 diamond gypsum, craft them into 1 diamond gypsum orb, take that orb and trade it out for a gloves cast. And then that gloves cast is going to give you a guaranteed increase to your expertise for your gloves slot. So one thing that players were asking for, myself included, was there needs to be a easier and a more clear path to upgrading your character and your expertise slots than there was before. Because before it was RNG and it wasn't really fun and it wasn't really overly engaging. Now I know if I log in each day and I do at least 2 outpost rushes, I'm going to get my 2 ruby gypsum. I'm going to craft those into a ruby orb, and then I can use that orb to guarantee an increase to one of my slots, whatever slot that I want. And that's the really cool thing. Now, to kind of build on this, each orb has a 24-hour cooldown. Meaning, if I use a ruby orb, that ruby orb cannot be used for 24 hours. And that cast for gloves cannot be used for 24 hours. However, I can go and do diamond, I can do obsidian, I can do emerald, citron, topaz. I can do all of the other gypsum and craft into their own respective orbs, and then take those orbs and do a different cast. So every cast has an individual cooldown. And this is where things get really, really interesting, because if you go and do a full clear and get all the gypsum that you need for each day, and then craft those into orbs, and then do all of your casts that you need, then you're looking at 8 guaranteed upgrades every single day. Every single day. Now, is there a grind to this? Absolutely. But if you don't want to do that, you can just log in like me, right? I'm a busy parent. That's why, you know, YouTube has kind of been a little light towards the end of the year, but I'm a busy parent. So going on and doing a couple outpost rushes, getting my ruby gypsum, and then going and hitting some of the trees for the winter festival event and getting a bunch of diamond gypsum. This is super helpful because now I can upgrade, get a guaranteed upgrade, at least 1 or 2 every single day to then build my character up. So this is probably the biggest thing they've added recently, and I think this is the most impactful and the reason a lot of people have come back to continue playing. Okay, so we spent a ton of time talking about gypsum. Let's talk about some balancing passes, and then we're going to jump into things that are coming up that are going to really, really change the way we play this game, and these are huge. I'm super excited for these. So in terms of balancing passes, Great Axe heavy attacks no longer double tap. This was fixed a long time ago, but if you were somebody who left when this was a really big problem in PvP, just know that's been fixed. Warhammer is less OP when it comes to stun locking. They also buffed the Juggernaut tree to give more variety for builds. Hatchet damage has been reduced, and the throwing tree got a decent buff. Then we have certain spear and musket abilities. All these got buffed to make them a little bit more viable. So for the spear, you have sweep, skewer, perforate, cyclone, and vault kick. All of those got a buff to make them more deadly, more powerful, and more viable. For musket, traps, sticky bomb, stopping power, power shot, and shooter stance all got buffed to make them more viable. When it comes to Fire Staff and Ice Gauntlet, so the Fire Staff's damage and the Ice Gauntlet's CC has been reduced, but they want to kind of buff these up a little bit. They think they kind of went a little too far on the last pass, but still, that's going to be very interesting. Now, another big change to the Ice Gauntlet is that Entombed, which is that skill that kind of freezes you in a big ice block, no longer heals you. So you're not going to see players freeze themselves and then regain all of their health and mana back. This was a big problem, right? And this was so frustrating in PvP because the Entombed skill was so powerful. Because you'd get somebody down really low, they'd pop Entombed, you'd see their health shoot back up, you'd see their mana shoot back up. If you broke them out of their Entomb, they would explode, knocking you back and dealing damage. If you didn't do it and then they activated their skill again, they could explode, knocking you back and dealing damage. So it just seemed like such a lose-lose. So they went and they changed it. Now there's still the knockback, there's still a slight amount of damage, definitely not as much as there used to be, but it no longer heals you. You will still regain all of your mana though. So that's something that, you know, keep that in mind. So people are using it as like an evocation now instead of a full-blown like get out of jail free card or a panic button. Then we have the Life Staff. So the Life Staff has been nerfed 20% across the board. And the reason they did this is to encourage healers to use a light equip load, so light armor, instead of heavy. Light load now gives, you know, that plus 15% healing increase, So if you go full light, you're only looking at a 5% nerf, but if you still want to stick heavy, that's fine. You have more survivability, but you'll lose 20% of your healing. So that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're a healer looking to come back. So those are all the things they've added to the game. I mean, this is 20 minutes so far into this video that we're talking about stuff that's been added, and whether or not it's a good ad or a bad ad, we've talked about that a little bit. But now I want to talk about things that are going to be coming very soon. I'm talking the first quarter of 2022 and as early as probably February. So the big thing is something called mutators. So mutators are coming to expeditions, and these are modifiers to the existing expeditions, which are dungeons, that will increase the difficulty, but also increase the rewards that you're going to get from that expedition. And these rewards are going to be gear, all of that fun stuff, but it'll also drop a new resource that can be used to upgrade specific weapons, and these weapons will be needed to complete higher level mutators. We don't know much about this yet, we just know gear up, because there's 10 difficulty levels, and these are going to be very difficult. They're going to challenge different groups of players, and they're going to challenge your build. If you have a very weak build, it's not going to work well. So you need to have a tight build, have a tight group, be able to heal through things, be able to tank through things. But the thing is, they said you're also going to need to stack resistances or certain damage types in order to be successful. You can't just go in dealing a damage that all the enemies have high resistance to it, because it won't work. You won't be able to pass certain DPS gates, you won't be able to pass certain thresholds or checks, so you need to make sure that you plan accordingly. It sounds like this is going to be their version of Mythic Plus. I'm very excited for it. I think it's going to be really cool, and I can't wait to see all of like the speed runs and all that fun stuff. But this one will be added into the January PTR, so it is right around the corner. Now let's talk about weapons. So we were talking about how the Void Gauntlet got added, and that's the newest, kind of the latest and greatest weapon to the game. The next one is going to be the Blunderbuss, which is a run and gun playstyle. Now I'm curious to see how this one works, right? Because we know a blunderbuss is almost this like big kind of trumpet shaped barrel that you can just shove things into. We've seen like, oh man, take all this like dirt and forks and stuff and put them in this blunderbuss and just shoot it, and whatever happens happens. I'm curious to see if this is closer to like a pirate style blunderbuss, or if it's closer to almost like a soldier, like a Varangian knight style blunderbuss. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how they implement this one and what the two trees are, but I am very, very curious to see what they end up doing here. Now, daggers and great swords are currently being worked on. For great swords, they gave us a little bit of an insight. They want to do something with stance dancing and switching your stances. I'm guessing more of like a berserker style stance where you drag the great sword behind you and it's more like, chaotic and wild, versus having the great sword like held up next to you, more like a knight. So that's going to be interesting, but they don't have a release date on those quite yet. Now, a new weapon to accompany the shield is not being worked on. So for those of you, myself included, right, having a weapon with a shield is just so exciting. I don't know. I love the kind of sword and board, spear and shield, mace and shield look. And I think those could work out really well, but they haven't began even designing these quite yet. So don't expect these anytime soon. Now, the last two things. One, they want to add in more dynamic events to make the world feel more alive. So I'm guessing these are going to be new public events or something that you could stumble upon to really kind of give that world a little bit of, to zhuzh it up a little bit, right? Oh man, I'm running along, and next thing I know, there's this, big kind of war happening between the lost and the drowned, and they're fighting, and I need to go, clear the area out or something like that. I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but more dynamic events would be great in this one. And lastly, for those who have been following along with the story, they're wrapping up the first chapter of the story, and they will be adding in the second chapter, which they mention that they want to introduce more culture and mythology into the world. So most likely they'll be doing that through new zones, like probably the Brimstone Sands zone will be the first one where they'll introduce maybe Egyptian or maybe Mayan mythology and culture, which would be very interesting. So overall, guys, I mean, there are things coming, and this game is just going to continue building and building and building. And as much as everybody's been raking it across the coals, dragging it through the mud, New World isn't going anywhere. They've invested a significant amount of money into this game, it still is relatively successful compared to other MMOs out right now. I mean, 115,000 concurrent players with the potential of upwards of 200 or 300,000 on new releases and things like that. I mean, this is still a successful game. So they're not going to be sticking a fork in it and moving on anytime soon. So we can really just kind of expect, hey, let's just stick around for the grind. Let's see how they evolve this game. Let's see what the first DLC looks like. Let's see what the first expansion brings to the table, because right now they're still adding on things. I mean, you have the mutators, you have new weapons. Hopefully, you know, we'll have new dungeons and new areas and all of these things that'll be coming relatively soon as well. So let's get back to the first question that I asked when this whole video started, right? Is it worth coming back to play New World right now? Is it worth playing if you've never played? I took a long break, and a lot of you probably noticed that. I left New World. I went and I played some of my more classic games that I really liked, where I didn't feel like I was under such pressure to put out a bunch of content. And just the burnout was real. I mean, I played so many hours of this game during the first month to 2 months. It really kind of killed my enjoyment for it. It killed my enjoyment for YouTube content creation, and I needed to take a step back, so I did. Doing that and kind of keeping an eye on the game from a distance, I really like what they've been doing. And coming back after that break, I've really kind of rediscovered and found my enjoyment for the game again, which is great. So yeah, so I think if you're somebody who left, come back, give it a shot, see what's changed. See if, you know, if you're a big crafting person, see if you like the aptitude thing. If you're a PvP person, check out the new PvP missions and the flagging to see if that's worth your time. If you're someone who is a busy parent or a busy college student and you don't really have a ton of time to level up your character, but you really want to, the new expertise and GYPSUM system respects your time, so you should be able to get those increases that you need. And then lastly, the balance passes. If you really didn't like the way a certain weapon performed, maybe that weapon does extremely well now, or maybe it does poorly, and that's why you quit in the first place, because you're like, this damn thing is so overpowered, I hate it. So there's a lot that has been changed. There's a lot still coming, and I'm curious to hear what all of you think about it. But I think for now, yes, it's worth coming back and checking out, especially if you've already paid for the game. So guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Vulkan, and I'm really excited to get back and creating content for you guys in 2022. It's going to be super fun. So with that being said, I'll see you guys next time.
Sound off one and all.